Hello, Girl Scouts. So because it is just so stinking beautiful outside, I thought we would leave our computers inside and head outdoors and look at some of the most insane and beautiful blooming roses that might be right in our own backyards. So right now we also have the Girl Scouting at Home challenge happening, and part of that is both walking outside, spending time outside, and also learning how to identify different kinds of plants. And right now, roses are blooming like crazy. And my parents are both huge advocates and they love planting roses. And they have a beautiful rose garden that they have been working on for over 20 years. And my dad was kind enough to walk me through the garden and show me how to identify different plants based on their leaves and their petals and the glossiness and all kinds of cool stuff. So I learned a lot from him and I hope that you will too. Hi, Dad.
Hi. Each rose that you see here has its own specific name, and I'm not going to give you all that. I'm going to describe the basic categories of roses because you could tell just sort of from the habit. What the habit means is how the rose grows, how it blooms. You can tell what type of rose it is. So let me give you a specific example. If you look up, you can see that there are roses that are climbing over this arch and over this arbor right here. Those are all what's known as climbers. And we like climbers. We grow a lot of them in our yard because frankly, they're beautiful and they don't take a lot of work and they produce an amazing amount of blooms. So one example, this is a Cecil Bruner rose, this one right here. Now with the little pink blossoms, you can see that the blossoms are just past. About a week ago, they were all in bloom, and you can just imagine what that might have looked like. And that's what this rose does every year, and the only thing that we have to do to keep it going is to hack it back so it doesn't completely take over the neighborhood. Over here you see one that's still in bloom. It's got these big kind of floppy white flowers. That's a type of rose called Sally Holmes, and they're actually pretty common. You see a lot of them. They bloom a little bit later than the Cecil Bruners. So the Sally Holmes is still in bloom. And the Cecil Bruner, this pink one over here, has passed.
How can you tell the difference between a Sally Holmes and a Cecil Bruner?
Well, the easiest way is to look at the bloom. Because the Sally Holmes, they have these very simple petals, blossoms. There's only 5 petals to them, and they're kind of open. They have a little bit of a pink blush to them, but they're basically pretty white. The other way you can tell is the Cecil Bruner, they're really vigorous. They just like to take stuff over. So when you see really huge climbing roses with little pink blossoms, in this part of the world, it's probably a Cecil Bruner. Too, look how different the shapes of the leaves are.
I mean, these leaves are so much bigger.
These are dark green, big, and glossy. These are kind of a medium green, and they're very small, and they're not glossy at all. This right here is a hybrid tea rose. So it's never going to get much bigger than this. It's actually already had its first bloom. They had very pretty kind of purple flowers. And we trimmed off the dead blossoms, and you can see the second growth is coming up. And in about a month, there will be blossoms at the end of these new branches. This is another category of rose. It's not a climber. It's called Graham Thomas. That's the name of the rose. But the type of rose it is called grandiflora. Grandiflora is a shrub rose, but you can tell from the word grand, it's big.
Yeah.
And in fact, this rose is big enough that if you scan up there, you'll see all those yellow blossoms up there. That is the same rose. It's just that we've trained it to be a climber rather than a shrub. And it's a beautiful rose. It's very, very healthy, as you can see. And it's actually a little bit past the top of its bloom.
It's stunning.
But look at those colors. And it's just it's an amazing rose. It's a beautiful, beautiful rose. Does really well in the Sacramento area. It's called Graham Thomas. This is a shrub rose. This is a very old-fashioned rose. And one thing that you'll notice about this rose, it's like the Sally Holmes over there. Look how very, very simple the petals are.
It's not super clustered either.
It isn't. They're very open. They're very simple. You can see very prominent little stamens in there. And this is characteristic of what roses originally look like in the wild. So this really hasn't been bred to be that different from the way roses appeared in nature before they started getting hybridized.
So if you go to a lot of like public rose gardens, are they going to have a lot of hybrid tea rose flowers?
They will. If you go to a public rose garden, you'll see a lot of kind of roses in a line. many of them will be hybrid teas because they have the showiest blossoms. This rose right here is a climber. And obviously it's been bred to be a climber, and it's really easy to train. In this case, we've trained it over this little playhouse here. And it's called New Dawn. It's really vigorous, it's very healthy. If it gets in a spot that it likes, give it some water, this is what will happen. One interesting thing about the New Dawn is it is a really nice rose, and it's really easy to grow. And it also has the most brutal thorns you've ever seen. So it's like the canes. This is the cane in here. These thorns are unbelievably sharp. I mean, you almost could use this in warfare. They're so brutal. This is the oldest type of rose there is. Every once in a while, you'll see roses growing in the wild because they do arise naturally in the wild. If you're walking in a path in the foothills, you could come across a rose, and it might look something like this, kind of like a brambly shrub spraying out like this. This one's called ballerina because it's got these little delicate pink blossoms. This one has been bred so that it has more flowers than you would see in a wild rose. But this is an example of kind of the structure of what roses look like before people started breeding them to turn into climbers or hybrid teas or whatever. Actually, just a week ago was a much bigger shrub, but I was playing badminton and I tripped and fell backwards and broke off 2 big branches right in the middle.
That is a true story.
Look at this rose right here. It looks kind of familiar with the one that we saw over the playhouse. It's got that nice pink blossom on a climbing cane with brutal thorns. That's a New Dawn. But I want to show you something. If you look at the cane, it comes down to the ground, and then there's another cane shooting up. And now, look at these
It's a red rose.
kind of purplish red flowers. That's the same plant. This New Dawn used to be a lot bigger, and then it died back about 2 years ago. It died back, but it didn't die because roses are incredibly tough. But what it did do was it started sending out canes from the base of the plant. This just happened this last year. All this has grown in the last year with the red blossoms. And what has happened is the rootstock, the base of the plant, sent out these canes, and it's a different variety of rose. The reason for that is almost every rose that you buy at a florist, at a gardening shop, is grafted onto rootstock. Because what they've done is they figured out a way to take the rose and stick it on that rootstock on another type of rose that is much more vigorous and healthy. All the roses you see around here, they've all got that same kind of basic rootstock because it's healthy.
I even learned something new today.
Good.
But I just wanted to take a second to talk about gardening and being outside. A, because it's freaking beautiful outside right now. And also because I grew up in Central California, and then in Northern California. So I thought that roses grew like this in the springtime everywhere. I didn't realize how lucky and fortunate we are to have the warm climate that we do. So I thought maybe other Girl Scouts who have grown up in this area didn't realize also how freaking lucky we are to have these incredible blooms and these rose gardens every single April and May. Well, thank you, Dad.
You're welcome.
All right. Have fun exploring outside, Girl Scouts. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.